Great. Uh, Thank you very much, everybody here who is here in person and folks online that are joining us. Thank you very much for joining us in our first Green Living workshop. We will be running a series of monthly workshops, second Sunday of each month, 11:30 after the Sunday service. They'll run for no more than 1 hour. And you can see in our schedule the themes of the upcoming workshops. Nearly all of them will be centered around the topic of climate change, which is the unifying theme of the Green Sanctuary. They'll include topics of transportation, food and composting, the story of stuff, outdoor habitats, and energy and utilities. And at the end, in May, we will have an environmental fair where we'll have tables with each of these topics presented again and answer questions. So the Green Sanctuary education team is really excited about this series of workshops. And the team, by the way, consists of myself, Ed Pollack, Diane Alexander, who's right here, and Linda Scacco, who's joining us from somewhere out in the Rocky Mountains, Colorado. We are working very, very hard, very busily on these workshops. Today is our kickoff. And David, if you could please advance to the next slide. Today's workshop will be all about carbon footprints and carbon offsets. Next slide, please. It's no secret, it's no news to you that we're living in a climate crisis. To call it simply climate change is not strong enough a word, and many people now, many activists refer to it as a climate crisis, which it is. And it's evidenced in so many ways. Every day we read it in the news, whether it's wildfires raging in the West, floods, here in West Hartford to Germany to China, coastal storms causing incredible damage in our coastal communities, terrific or terrible droughts out west and killing heat waves. All of these are just evidence again and again of this climate crisis that we as humanity have created. And the unifying components of this climate crisis are really very simple. It's just several what are referred to as greenhouse gases. Next slide, please, David. And these greenhouse gases, which carbon dioxide is the most common, makes up about 80%, but also methane, nitrous oxides, and water vapor, they combine in something known as the greenhouse effect. Now, before humans started influencing the greenhouse effect, it was a natural phenomenon, this greenhouse effect. And actually, the greenhouse effect allows for life on Earth. It allows the Earth to exist within a temperature range which is compatible with life, which allows life. Without the greenhouse effect, the Earth would be frozen and there would be no life here. So there was a greenhouse effect, for millennia before people started influencing it. And that greenhouse effect is the work of these very simple molecules, carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide, and methane, but primarily carbon dioxide. And they work to trap some of the energy that enters the atmosphere as radiant light coming from the sun. Most of that energy is reflected back into the atmosphere, but some of it is trapped by those greenhouse gases. And for millennia, they kept the Earth within a narrow temperature range. But really since the dawn of the industrial age, we've been steadily and then rapidly increasing the concentration of these greenhouse gases shown on the right slide, so that they now trap much more heat than they did before we started increasing their concentrations. And since the Industrial Revolution, we've increased the temperature of the Earth by about 2 degrees Fahrenheit. And it doesn't sound like a lot, 2 degrees, but it's, when you're heating the entire planet 2 degrees Fahrenheit, that's a tremendous amount of heat. And that's what's causing all of these crises, climate crises that we were talking about. Next slide, please. So, we have these climate crises, and we're asking, what are we going to do about it? And there are lots of ways that each of us can reduce the impact that we're having on the climate crises. And throughout these workshops, we'll be giving you lots of suggestions on how each of you can minimize your impact. Next slide, please, David. And today we're very, very happy to welcome David Gonchi to speak about this topic. David is a longtime member of the church. He lives in Glastonbury. He is a banker by profession. He's an environmentalist by passion. And he's advocated for and educated about climate or carbon offsets for many, many years. And he has, through a combination of lifestyle choices and purchasing carbon offsets, he and his family have achieved not just a carbon neutral, but a carbon negative lifestyle. And so he's here to talk to us about carbon footprints, carbon offsets, and he's going to show you some neat websites where you can calculate both your carbon footprint as well as purchase carbon offsets to achieve neutrality. So Dave, please join me in welcoming David Gonchi here to the workshop.
Well, today's presentation is going to consist both of slides and a live walkthrough of a couple of websites. Dan, I got a message earlier that my internet connection was unstable, but it's looking okay. So my apologies if anything comes up. I've got about a 40-page PDF deck with lots of information that I understand will be posted somewhere out there at the appropriate part of the church's website that I'll encourage you to visit if you have continuing curiosity. And my email is my first name at my last name, so it's david@gonchi.com if anybody wants to reach out. So our first slide just asks the basic questions about what is a carbon footprint, how do you calculate it, how do you calculate it for the church, can the footprint of a community be calculated? And just to quickly address these while this slide is up, there are dozens and dozens of carbon footprint calculators on the internet. All you got to do is Google them. I'm going to be showing one highly regarded calculator this morning called Cool Climate. And my fuller deck that'll be out on the web has information about other calculators. Some are easy, some are hard, and there are lots of estimates, lots of variability among them. It's just the state of the world and the state of the science, but they're easy to use. And in terms of the footprint of the church, it is possible to calculate the footprint of the church. Interfaith Power and Light has some resources to help with that. Information about this is also in the slide deck that we'll have out on the web. And the UCC, the Congregationalists have been particularly active. I've got a link to their work as well. And you can also find a number of churches. The Anglican churches in England have been really focused on this for more than a decade, talking about individual churches. I found one UU church out in Michigan. So definitely there's room for the church to do that work if it wants to pursue it. And then in terms of the question about can the footprint of a community be calculated, it can be. I don't see it done a lot. These are very difficult things to measure. I live in Glastonbury. It's got a higher kind of income. It's got a lot of professional businesses. Next door is East Hartford, lower income industry. It has a 100-year-old jet engine manufacturer, whatever's left there. You know, to calculate the carbon footprint of East Hartford would have to be impossible. And the resources of the community to address those are very different as well. So while it's theoretically possible, it doesn't show up a lot on the internet. And at the end of the day, you know, we as humans, the nearly 8 billion of us, are putting out 35 billion tons of carbon into the atmosphere. And whether it's in my community or the community next door or wherever, you know, I encourage us to think about the overall project, which is the 35 billion tons of carbon we're all putting into the atmosphere. So moving on, this just to where is the greenhouse gas coming from? You know, Ed showed us the basic slide. This is just looking at the fact that here in the US, you know, the big contributors are transportation, electricity, industry, and then commerce and residential and agricultural. And you'll see how this looks on the other side when we get around to talking about offsets. And then now we get to talking about carbon footprints. So we're looking at per capita carbon footprint. In the US, the average is 20 tons. Each one of us is responsible for 20 tons or 40,000 pounds of carbon waste in the atmosphere each year. These are annual numbers. And I think it's easiest done really at the national level, because I think at a national level, we can sort of measure, well, how much electricity is getting produced in this country, how much fossil fuel is getting produced in this country, et cetera, et cetera. And that's all calculated out and divided by the population. So the US puts out about 5.5 billion tons. We have 330 million people. That number averages to about 16 tons a person. And I've seen in estimates anywhere from 15 to 30 tons per person in the US. So again, we understand we're dealing with ranges here. In Europe and Japan, it's just about half those levels. The communities are much more dense, much more use of mass transportation. Gasoline is $6 a gallon, and it shows up in the numbers. This next one was done by an MIT study. The web links are out in the web presentation. MIT did a study that the average US homeless person is responsible for 8 tons. Why is that? Well, they eat food. The food comes from somewhere. They have clothes. The clothes come from somewhere. There are services, government services, et cetera. And so this study, which is about 10 years old, came up with that conclusion. The bottom line, I think most of us need to understand, is no matter what we do in our personal lives, we're still going to own 10 tons. And we should be working on, you know, what our current footprints are and getting it down, but we're never going to make it go away on our own. And that's really where my focus is. Well, what do we do about that? And then the global average, there are 35 billion tons, there are nearly 8 billion people, so it's working out to about 4 tons on average. So we in the US are kicking out 40 tons per person, the global average is 4 tons. And then the sustainable fair share is 2 tons, and this is based on the UN's work for where we need to be in 2030, you know, barely a little more than 8 years away from now, in order to keep the carbon to a 1.5 degree increase, the global warming, and that's 2 tons. And here we are at 20 tons. So we've got a lot of work to do. And we as individuals, if we believe that those numbers are correct, the only way we're going to get there as individuals is if we use carbon offsets as part of our response to the situation. I would also mention, I like to make a comparison to the physical waste in our lives. We have households, we have waste bins and recycling bins and trash baskets, and we empty one thing into another, and it gets collected, and then somebody comes around and picks it up once a week. That averages 1 ton for each of us. So I think that really helps us understand the carbon challenge, you know, and we're used to the physical stuff. We've got waste baskets in most rooms. We've got receptacles in our houses. We see it, we touch it. The seen waste is 1 ton. The unseen waste is 20 tons. And it's our waste. And it's a really good metaphor for me. And the point is, we don't let our waste build up in our houses. We don't put it on our neighbor's lawn. We deal with it. Now here in West Hartford, the town takes care of it. In Glastonbury, we have to take care of it. We have to either take it to the transfer station or pay somebody to do it. And generally speaking, we're paying $200 to $400 a year to do that. And I'm sure the town of West Hartford, it's working into the municipal budget, is the same thing. So we deal with our physical waste that we can see, and we pay to deal with it. And generally, I don't hear too many people complaining from week to week about the cost of that. Well, we can also do something about our carbon waste. The first thing we can do is reduce it, but then we can offset it, which is a form of recycling. And it really doesn't cost us any more than what we're already paying individually and as towns, et cetera, for the physical waste in our lives. So that's a key part of my message, is to understand that. I'm now going to take us over to the carbon calculator site I've chosen to demonstrate. This is the Cool Climate Calculator. And usually when I come here, I just Google Cool Climate Calculator. Cool Climate is one word and it'll come up. It's sponsored by the University of California out at Berkeley. So this is the Cool Climate screen. And what this is showing is they pre-fill everything. So they make it easy. And they say, well, for the average household in the US of 2.5 people, the total carbon output is 50 tons for the household. Gee, that's not showing here either the way it was. Anyway, when you come out here, it's pre-filled, and it also shows you where it's coming from. For some reason, this thing already thought I got started on this. But you can also key in your location. So I'm going to key in West Hartford. No, we can't. And let's see if that brings me to West. No, that didn't like it. How many times you practice these things? Let me give it a second. It should bring it up. Okay, here we go. So here are all the West Hartfords out there. So I live in West Hartford, Connecticut, or I'm pretending I did. Well, let's say that I've got 2 people in my household. And let's say our household's got 40,000 in average income. This is not showing at all what I was, honestly, here. I'm going to cancel out of here a second because it's not demonstrating what I would have expected. Give me a second. Cool calculator. Turn back. Well, something has happened to this display. When you come in here, it would show you that this household of 2 people in West Hartford is responsible for 60 tons. It's actually 30 tons per person if you live in West Hartford. Again, my apologies, it's not showing it here for some reason I can't quickly figure out. And it would show you that right up here. Please ignore what was on the screen, but that's when, if you come in fresh, you'll see it. I've done it several times here. And it shows you basically what the components are. And then you can, the idea is you go through each top tab, and then you can customize your own footprint. You put in, if you have one vehicle or two vehicles, if it's a gasoline, a hybrid, or an electric, how many miles per year you drive. And as you put that information in, the little green bar over here will adjust up or down, and you'll see how you're moving against the average as you put in your information about your vehicles in your household. You can then move over there to your home, put in the information about the amount of electricity you use. You can put it either in terms of dollars or kilowatts, natural gas, heating oil, living space, water usage, and there are a few other fields on this screen where you would put in information. So just as an example here, if I moved up electricity from oh, here, yeah, if I moved it up to 11,150, which is the standard, this right-hand bar just went up. So as you put in information here, the bars will adjust real time for what you've put in. And then the next tab is food and how much meat and fish and eggs you use, grains and baked goods. These are per day measures, dairy. And as you put those in and adjust them, the bars will go up and down. And then the shopping one is, I would say I would be inclined to use the averages that they put in as a default, because this takes into account the trucks that bring the food to the grocery store, the refrigerators and the freezers and the lights in the grocery store. Same thing with services. You know, if you're using medical services, there's a doctor with offices and equipment and whatnot. So it's a little hard, I think, for you look at these things and say, I can't be using $400 a month of carbon from the services I use. This one in particular, I think it's a little bit hard not to use their averages. And I'm sure their averages for West Hartford are somewhat reflective of local conditions as compared to averages in Utah or somewhere else. So you work through these various tabs to put in your footprint, and then you get over and to the take actions section. This left-hand side gives most climate carbon calculators give you a lot of things to play with about what you can do to reduce your footprint. And you can set up an account out here and select various things and track your performance over time. You could, as a group, you know, you could invite people to take the challenge and see what you do over the next year, and just come out here, log into your account and see what you've done. And again, as you put information in on the left, your carbon footprint will adjust on the right. And then you can even compete against people who participate in this. There are more than 30 screens of people here who are competing. This is the leaderboard. And whoever's doing it, you know, the leaderboard, I don't pay too much attention to. But my point is, even if you just come to the second screen out of 30, and you're looking at people, many of whom are in the US, I talked about the fact that here's somebody in Denver, one person, and they've got a 10-ton carbon footprint. And again, they're in the leaderboard, right? This goes to 30 slides. This is just the second slide. It reinforces my point that you've got a 10-ton floor effectively, even if you're way the heck up at the top of the leaderboard out here with cool climate. So I'm going to leave my demonstration of this cool climate calculator there. Any questions before I move on?
I have a question. It looks like transportation might be the biggest, like the most impactful thing in most of our lives. If it's not that to be true?
Yes. You know, and followed by home heating and cooling. Those are the two biggies. And that brings me to my next slide, actually. You know, so when people do this, you know, what do they see? There's low impact stuff over here, and you know, upgrading light bulbs, for example. And then, you know, stuff, moderate impact, of hanging clothes to dry them, recycle, washing in cold water, moving on to a hybrid. It's more substantial here. These are tons in the vertical axis. So if you replace your gas car with a hybrid, you'll reduce your CO2 emissions by 0.5 ton a year. This is the scale over here, shows the number of tons. The really, big time stuff is over here on the right, giving up meat in your diet, switching to an electric car, buying green energy, staying off of airplanes, giving up your car totally, and then having fewer children. The whole issue of population control, which clearly a population that's pushed in my lifetime has gone from 3-some-odd billion to closing up on 8 billion, has that and the technology have driven us to where we are. So, and I think this helps to reinforce the point, no matter how much you do, if you're starting with 15, 20, or 30 tons of CO2, you're still going to have offsets that you need to buy to get to carbon neutral. So, that brings us to what is a carbon offset. And the main point, there's a lot of dispute about carbon offsets because people can use them as a free get out of jail free card. Well, I'll just go ahead and continue to generate carbons, and I'll use my financial resources to offset it. We always start with reducing our carbon footprint, but then we're dealing with what's left over. Some related considerations are the social justice issues. We'll see those as we go shopping for carbon offsets. Directing your donations to offset long trips, because that's a commonly done thing. The UUGA's always encouraged people to offset their travel to go to General Assembly. And then what does it take to approach carbon neutrality? And I've already mentioned you can do it for no more than the cost that's already being spent to take care of your visible waste every year. And we'll see how some of the economics look. As people and so this is just another view as well. What is a carbon offset? It starts with the fact that we're producing carbon emissions. Over on the bottom right, we're finding projects that are reducing carbon in the atmosphere. We're helping to support those and receiving certificates. And in essence, we've neutralized or recycled the carbon that we've produced. This just shows in 2019, the volume of carbon offsets was 100 million tons. This is expected to grow to as much as 5 to 10 billion tons just in this decade, which is important because we're dealing with 35 billion tons of stuff. And again, this is, well, where is it then showing up? Where are the carbon offsets being going to? Renewable energy, forestry and land use, waste disposal, household devices, et cetera. The other really interesting thing here is you see the average price paid, and a lot of these are in the wholesale market. You're rarely gonna see prices this low, and I can tell you prices are going up quite a bit. When I was shopping 3 or 4 years ago, I could snag great quality credits for $3 a ton. Much harder to do these days. At the wholesale level, the prices are lower. And another interesting thing is, if you're trying to, one of my social justice goals is forestry and land use, but it costs almost 3 times as much per ton as some other things. So what do I do? That's a decision we all have to make individually as we look at the economics of the marketplace. So I'm going to flip over to, I'm going to show you a carbon offset provider called Cool Effect. cooleffect.org. The slide deck has got several pages about carbon offset providers. I chose, this actually isn't one of my favorite ones, but I chose it because it's so great to demonstrate off of, and it is one of the better recommended sites. So you've determined an amount of carbon you want to offset. and now you want to go out and buy offsets. And there are many providers. This is one of them. And, you know, for some people, they just don't want to do a lot of work. So at Cool Effect, they've said, well, you know, the average US footprint is 16.6 tons. We're selling you offsets at $9.91 a ton, offset now. So you can come out here once a year, click a couple buttons with your credit card, and you're done for the year. So people who feel like, oh, this is too much for my head, you can go to websites like this and it'll give you a number and you can just push a button. And so if you go here for the US average, you know, $10 a ton, you're all done. And yes.
What are you doing when you do this?
You are buying certificates that you'll receive in the mail that show that you funded projects and are getting verified offsets of $1 a ton. And I'll show you some of the projects here where that becomes more real. So you'll get a chance to see that in a second.
So is that $64.51? Is that per year?
Mm-hmm.
And that would offset 16 tons if you put in this particular.
Yeah, this is a one-time purchase of 16.6 tons. $10 is a pretty good price right now. And so that's what you're doing with this purchase. And I refer to packaging. Let's see, as you can see as we move down the site here, you can buy carbon offsets for travel here. Let's do that. Suppose you're going on a trip. And this will let you scope out the air travel, the driving, the accommodations, and if you're cruising, the cruise. And you can put in information about your trip, and it'll get you, you know, the amount of carbon that you're going to produce from your trip. And then you can push a button to offset it, and you've made a one-time purchase. Joe?
I'm still not clear on what you're getting here, kind of like Susan's question. In other words, what does my $161 that you had back on the other slide actually do?
Right.
Does it help some green energy company put up another turbine?
Yes.
Which costs a lot of money, so my 161 here, but is that what it's doing?
Yes. So now we're looking at the projects, because another way you can shop, suppose you've got 10 tons you're trying to offset. And by the way, I recommend diversifying because it's fun. And I compare this to a portfolio of stocks, right? You invest in a company. Well, that company may do well or poorly. You diversify. You know, these are human endeavors. So it's good to diversify. And it's also kind of fun. But so what are the projects that Cool Effect is currently investing in? You don't have to go in at the high level I went to. You can go in at the project level and say, well, let's see, I want to avoid forestry loss in the Amazon. The price is pretty good here. It's $8.79 a ton. And I want to learn more about that project. So I click on Learn More. And it's telling me, and again, one thing I like about this project is all the information, this site is all the information it gives you about the project. It says for this project, you're reducing CO2. Sometimes you're reducing methane. It's making a reference, and some of you folks on the Green Sanctuary Committee may know about drawdown. If drawdown is the best thing, that study that's been done about how we're going to get carbon down. And this is telling you which solutions in drawdown you're contributing to by doing this project. It then goes, and the money you're putting in is the money that the project needs in order to get off the ground. Yes.
Again, this part of me, I need to understand.
Yes.
Could I also just send $150 to the people who are running this project to do the same thing, or $160 or something?
You know, it's a good question. You know, and one thing I like about Cool Effect, they give you the statement that they only use 9% of the money. Everything else goes to the projects, and they make it very clear right here. I don't know of anybody who offsets, You can, I think, that requires more work to find the project, et cetera. Most people are using carbon offset sites to find projects and then invest in them through the site. And let me just continue to show you. So this talks about why they chose the project. It talks about the verification, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And lots of information about how the project works, why it is doing something that's additional or incremental, like if this project doesn't happen, there's going to be more carbon in the atmosphere as a result. There's the discussion of benefits and challenges, and then we get down to verifications. And that's something you can do easier here than yourself. You know, most of the carbon offsets you want to buy these days, you want independently verified. Is there anybody who's buying green electricity in their house right now?
We have off and on.
You'll never see a third-party verification on that. And you're basically trusting that between the company and the utility, it's coming through, but you're not gonna see anything that specifically talks about the carbon that's came out of the atmosphere as a result. Here, you have, and there are known established project verifiers, and this is part of the building of trust. They're like auditors. They go in and make sure that the project is running according to its goals, that its goals make sense, and that the money that's going in will in fact get additional carbon out of the atmosphere rather than being duplicative or being ineffective or leaking as a result of poor project design. And in the web, on the document we're going to have out on the web, there's lots of information about the verifiers. There's also, this is the social justice part. The UN has 17 sustainable development goals related to economics, related to social equity, related to education, related to poverty. And this shows which of the sustainable goals this particular project is supporting. And then they've got all kinds of reports that you can look at if you really want to dig into the project. So here at Cool Effect, you know, they're running with all of these projects, and you can go in and sort through projects that appeal to you and select them, and then fill up your shopping cart, and then you go and you cash out and you use PayPal or your credit card. Joe.
Yeah, just make sure I'm understanding here. So basically, Cool Effects is acting like in a role of compiler. They
yes.
find out about these projects. They assess the projects, and then we individually make contributions, for lack of a better term, into them. They compile it. So basically, they're providing capital for the project.
That's exactly right. They're providing capital.
As opposed to big institutions or retirement funds or whatever to invest capital without getting a capital stock purchase. No, we don't own part of this, but we're providing capital.
That's exactly right.
Then they go out and do this project, that project.
That's exactly right. And at the website, you'll see some of the providers like Cool Effect or 501c3s. So that becomes a tax deductible charitable donation for any of you folks who view that as something you'd want to think about. Not all providers are US registered 501c3s. Some are global, et cetera, et cetera. This is providing the base capital for projects because most of the remediation we need as a society needs it. And you know, whether it's done at the government level with Green New Deal, there are dollars that have to go into these things in order to make it work. In this case, you as an individual are using providers to do the work, to sort out, to verify, and give you as much satisfaction as you can get in this world that you've taken an actionable step to do this. I want to just show you one other site, which is the UN site. And I'm a big, you know, I advertise for this in U World every quarter. The UN site. Let me see if I can get it back up on the screen. Oh, okay, where is this? The UN? Yeah, here we are. We're at the UN site. if I go to, and I encourage people to go to climatepledge.global, because it's good to think of ourselves as global citizens. There you can sign a pledge along with other global citizens and use the UN site. And notice the UN site, like many sites, like many of the offset providers, has its own calculator. So I'm choosing this calculator just to show you that it's now putting you in touch with the UN carbon offset platform. So the UN offers its own platform that you can go shopping on, and you can choose from projects out here at the UN. So I've just selected the projects out here at the UN. And these are, I think, the Cool Effects site is a wonderful site. Most of its projects are nature-based, as you may have noticed. This is something you might have expected more. Wind park projects or biomass with cogen rice husk power, or hydroelectric projects. And at the UN site, you can sort by project type. So that, there are all these types of projects that you can look at. You can look at solar projects. You can look at wind projects, waste handling. And, you might have more confidence. Like I sort of feel like, well, if I'm doing methane capture, that's pretty straightforward to measure. You got a site, there's methane coming off of it, you capture it, you generate a credit. To me, that's a high level of likelihood I'm going to achieve the effect. But, all kinds of things you can choose from. You can choose by continent, country, and co-benefits. So this gets back to the social justice issues. Well, I want projects that favor education or welfare. And this will sort and let you choose the projects. And another thing about the UN projects is they're cheaper. I can get do a wind project for $3 a ton. I can do a rice husk cogen project for $2 a ton. $2 a ton is an amazingly low price. You're paying $10 a ton out there at Cool Effect. Well, what's going on here? Well, I would say that the UN is not always as rigorous as some of the other things, and so that becomes a judgment. I would say, and I show out on among the providers, some concentrate on US projects. Well, anything you do in the US is going to be more expensive than in Asia, just because we're a much more expensive country and there's much more lower hanging fruit in the rest of the world. So if you're thinking about, well, I want to get the most bang for my buck, you really want to be thinking about, well, how much am I paying per ton? And there are no easy answers here. I'm just pointing out that the prices go anywhere from an amazingly low $2 a ton here for this, up to $30 or $40 a ton for some biology-based things. And last thing I'm just going to show, I can sort here on the gold standard projects at the website. You'll see this is the highest level of verification. These projects are all gold standard verified. You can't get any better verification than that. And the prices go from $9 a ton up to $18 a ton. So this is just showing there are a lot of marketplaces, a lot of things you can choose from, or if you just want to keep it easy on yourself, you just go and find, a button to push and you're done.
What's the gold standard is only for the UN side, or is the gold standard something that
so the gold standard is an independent verifier. There's going to be a lot more information out on the deck. And among the probably several dozen projects here offered by the UN, 4 of them right now are gold standard verified. So if you're at the UN and you're not seeing a $2 or $3 a ton project here either. And if somebody's on a limited budget, I get that. Well, if you got 15 tons to offset, $2 a ton, that's $30. Can you find $30 once a year to pay? And you've made yourself carbon neutral according to the UN standards. In other cases, you're more interested in types of projects. strength of verification, and and I get stuck. I like to help support biodiversity, but if I have to pay 3 times as much, and we think we've got a red alarm fire here with a carbon, what do? I end up diversifying. Well, I'll buy a little of the biodiversity because that's the thing I most want to support, but I'm going to also give more of my dollars to something that's cheaper because my first goal is to get carbon down. Those are all fun things you can do with the marketplaces that are out there. And with that, I'll turn over to the final slide with Ed.
Thank you very much, David. I think a really important point to keep in mind, and David made this, he provided an awful lot of information. So I really want to reemphasize and highlight this point, which is David's shown us how he's told us what a carbon footprint is, and showed us some ways of calculating that carbon footprint and really customizing it to the point specific with the specific lifestyle choices that each of us has made. And through our lifestyle choices, we can reduce that carbon footprint, to as much as we can. But even with our best efforts, even if we all have, halos on our head, there's going to be some irreducible amount of carbon that we are responsible for through our choices and through the economy and government, the country we live in. So in order to bring that irreducible level down to 0 so that you're carbon neutral, then you have to resort to carbon offsets. And I think he's given us some really good information on, so I think we're responsible for doing research. We're not just plunking a credit card down, but importantly, we shouldn't look at these carbon offsets as we said, a get out of jail free card. Just, live a very carbon intensive lifestyle and say, well, at the end of the year, I'm just going to, offset it with this big purchase. I think morally, we have an obligation to live as green as possible. And that's really what our workshops, our monthly workshops are going to be all about. We chose David to kick things off because his talk really kind of covers the big topic, but in future workshops, we'll be digging in deep in each of these topics of transportation, food, solid waste, and so on, and giving concrete suggestions on how you can live more green. But for today, we're going to ask you not to just get up and just walk out of the room, but as in each of our workshops, we're going to ask those of you who are here in person or our online audience to sign up to a commitment, a personal commitment of what you're going to do within this topic to live more greenly, if I could say it that way. And we'll be doing this at the end of each of our workshops. And you might think, well, individually, what difference can I make? But an individual, is perhaps part of a family, is part of a congregation, is part of a town, a community, a state, a country, a world. So it all starts at the individual level. So we're asking each of us to make an individual commitment. And we already have some this chat's coming in. Signing up for everything. Good.